We're just approaching the west end of Muleless Island. You can see the beaches are somewhat poorly developed. There's a bit of a foreland on the north side of it and a long flanking spit on the east end of Muleless Island with fairly shallow water. It's October 23rd, the year 2000. We're flying at about 400 feet, about 70 miles per hour, and it's 15:32. We're at the head of Merrigomish Harbour. The tide is falling, and we can see just coming into view now is Indian Island. There's an erosional scarp at the west end. The back side of the island is more relief, maybe 15, 17 meter relief. Several buildings on the island, poorly developed beaches. There's a wharf extending from this side of the island, and particularly there's a church and burial grounds that are just coming up into view. At the far side of the island, you can see Holding Island just coming into view, which is joined to Indian Island, particularly at low tide, by the sediment accumulation that you can see in the foreground, these flanking spits. Holding Island has a bit more relief, more coves, much larger flanking spits than Indian Island did. But most of the islands are pretty much the same. A poorly developed beach. The back shore is an erosional cliff at the headlands, 3 to 5 meters maybe. And then the low gradient beach extends all along shore in the embayments. As you see coming up here, there's more low gradient and flats. And marsh vegetation usually closed off behind it. Occasionally, as we see here, there's a small outlet coming from the marsh back into the harbor. And we're just coming to the east end of Holding Island, which is called Point Betty. Betty Point, there's quite a well-defined spit. The sediment is probably, some of it's derived from the mouth of the harbor because there's an extensive flood tidal deposit all through this area. In fact, it forms one of the flanking spits with the other one over on Big Merrigomish Island. You can see it's a fairly well stabilized dune, some trees at the back shore, but it's fairly short and it changes into an erosional cliff with almost looks like bedrock at the base in the near shore, boulder and of course substrate above it. Moving farther along shore, you get that pocket marsh again, fronted by a sand dune and a sandier beach with a lot of seaweed on it at the moment. Most of the beach along this section, it's not, the lighting's not that good, is a mixture of sand and pebble, some cobble. There seems to be a bit of a dune ridge at the top, and as you come into this embayment between the main islands, where the Sutherland Islands are, there's sort of two drumlins. There's a much more extensive sand dune and sand beach flanking spit, extending off of the headland. Between the two small islands is a marsh, very low gradient, probably a lot of it submerged at high tide. And the islands themselves probably have about a 5 to 8 meter cliff, erosional, and a very coarse beach. just at the far western end of Merrigomish Harbour, in around Burnt Island and Back Harbour, as it's called. Used to be much more shallow waters in here. We're going to just circle around. There's a road that leads to this island. There's several houses on some of these inner islands. You can just see the back harbor, the sheltered embayment with the boat moored, and the house on the top. What a beautiful setting.
We're just circling around, I believe it's Quarry Island. The relief along the shore is a little bit higher. A lot of the shoreline has been stabilized by vegetation and trees. The backshore has been cleared for agriculture. And we'll just take a look around the Merrigomish Harbour, where we'd already viewed before, circling around towards the causeway that links Quarry Island to the mainland, and then continue out Back Harbour towards the outer coast. You can see the poorly vegetated, poorly developed beaches in this area.
As we head out of Back Harbour, we sort of cut that island off a little bit, but I think we've seen it in the earlier tape. I come out of Back Harbour towards the mouth of Merrigomish Harbour. Again, very low gradient shores. Sand and gravel. The upper back shore is much coarser, and we're just coming up to a nice house with a pool. And it's fronted by a low erosional scarp, about 1 to 3 meters, and a very mixed sediment beach. You can see several new developments here. There's a guy plowing, digging out the whole front of his cottage. And what's in the foreground is mostly turbid water, but there may very well be shallow water underneath it as well. And behind this western headland of Merrigomish Harbour, there's a wide, low flats marsh deposits, and just what we're going over right now are the flood tidal deposits of the harbour. You see the sand trailing off of the headland and wrapping around. There's a flanking spit, and there's a couple new ones being developed right now, and they're prograding all along this side. They're building. There's a lot of shallow water sand deposits on this side of the harbour, which is actually quite surprising because at the headland itself, there's very little sediment. It's very coarse.
Chisholm's Beach in the foreground is quite sandy with a lot of dune development, whereas just between it and King's Head, the beach switches into a very coarse rubble beach with an erosional cliff in the background, in the backshore. And as we approach King's Head, you can see the waves breaking over the shoal that's been left as the shoreline retreated, and the cobble or coarse beach extends right to King's Head, where the resident at the corner has constructed a huge shore protection structure, which includes a road that loops around this property and back out, giving them access, as well as larger material at the base of the cliff. The beach itself, Melmerby Beach, extends right to King's Head, and sand levels appear to be quite high compared to the 1988 video we flew. Several of the shore property owners have also added material along the base of the cliff as well as along the side of the cliff, and you can see there's a roadway that runs along the top of it. And the beach sand levels look high along here. You can see the waves breaking in on this beach right now. It's a very popular beach.
Along this section of the coastline, there's a lot of cottagers who have been building up in front of their place to try and protect them. What we're doing is we're coming up to the Muleless beach, the little harbor area. Quite an extensive beach, boardwalks. There's a provincial park, sand dune in the back shore. You can see some people down there, some trucks and so on for scale, but it's quite an extensive sand flat at the far western end, which is sort of constrained by Calhoun Point, or Calhoun Point. I'm not sure how they say it. It's very bedrock. You're into Pictou group carboniferous rocks, sort of horizontal bedded right there. Along this outer part of Roy Island, our time right now is 15:44. There's a bedrock ramp. This horizontally lined bedrock provides a nice environment for the ramping. The back shore is erosional glacial deposits, and you're left with a extensive platform in front of Roy Island. As you travel around the backside of Roy Island, there's quite an extensive flanking spit. It's also fringed by flood tidal deposits. And then behind that is a marsh. You can see the beach itself is dune vegetation. The flats offshore are inhabited by quite a few seabirds right now. Behind Roy Island, we're flying at about 400 feet and 70 miles per hour. You'll see that the shoreline itself is flats, very poorly developed beach. We've just gone over several of the large old tidal channels in the backshore here. I don't know if you'll be able to see them in the video, but the shoreline itself is low, gradual flats, marsh deposits in a few areas like you see now. And then the back shore in a few places is a low erosional scarp. Now we're just going along the backside of the Muleless beach. It's quite an extensive development, a lot of infrastructure for the provincial park, probably all well designed by Chris Strider of the Natural Resources. And what we're doing is coming up now in the parking area, the main parking area, and there's a couple of guys out in the back shore either swimming or picking clams. There's riprap along most of the back shore of the park, along the road. Two very large parking areas. And then at the head of the little harbor, there's a marsh near these cottages. This going to swing around. You can see several of the cottages at the end on top of the low erosional bluff. And then if you go along the inner shore of Little Harbour, it's 1547. There's a slightly better defined, a little steeper anyway, beach, pebble cobble, lower intertidal, sort of mixed sediment in the intertidal, mid-intertidal, and the upper intertidal is mixed sediment again. Then there's a bluff, and as you can see, the back shore is prime real estate, a lot of fairly very large establishments and pools and so on. And then you switch into a more natural setting, trees, a bit of a creek going through, and we're heading towards McNeil's Point. We're sort of going along King's Head area.
Traveling westward, you can see there's a bit wider intertidal, but we're now starting to see the evidence of sediment deposition coming in from the mouth of Little Harbour. You can see large tracts of sediment deposition at the edge of McNeil's Point. It extends across the mouth of Chapel Cove towards 44 Point. And you can see there's still a channel leading into Chapel Cove on the far side, but the flood tidal deposits are very extensive in this part of Little Harbour. As we view across to 44 Point, and then you see much more sand deposition extending from Bowen Island toward this peninsula that extends into Little Harbour along Powell's Cove. You can see much of it's exposed, probably even at high tide. It looks fairly dry. You can just see the Bowen Island in the foreground.
The back shore along here is some of it's artificially constrained, and others free erosional slope of 2 to 3 meters. The lower intertidal has started to become very vegetated, poorly developed. We're sort of cutting across Powell's Cove. There's a park here at the end called Powell's Provincial Park. I think you're just seeing the corner of it there now. Powell's Provincial Park. And we're still within the grounds. There's quite large flood tidal deposits in this part of Little Harbour. We've been just flying over it, and then we're getting back into a similar low wave and energy environment that we've seen elsewhere. There's a few small spits, as you can see here. It's fairly deep water, so there's been a fair bit of sediment to enclose all these things. And then we'll just sort of hover around. You see all the small features. We're going to follow along the back of Black Point, sort of James Beach area, and then go along the Bowen Island, because it's quite a large sand complex that fronts this sort of flood tidal deposit in the back of Little Harbour. And we're just getting a view now of James Beach, the Bowen Island. A very well-developed dune. It must be parkland because I see signs in there. And And then you can see the main channel coming into this part of Little Harbour. It actually bifurcates into several spots just on either side of this island. See sort of the anchor to the island is where the treed area. There's another small part of Bowen Island that has better dune vegetation, and it's been breached in the middle. It's a fairly wide washover area that you can see in the picture now. And then it's more established dune grass right out to the end. And then in fronting it is a large sand deposit, which is all part of that sort of inner flood tidal deposit. It's creating along the edge of the sand dune. There actually was an old, what looked like a wharf or groin that stuck out that may have held this sand in place, or does hold the sand in place. There you get a good view of the where the sand's all deposited in front. It's sort of a, it's got a sort of steep landward face to it on the sand flat and more gradual seaward face. So it's asymmetrical, probably due to the tidal currents that are flowing over it. We'll just be leaving Little Harbour now. We'll go and buy some of those nice establishments again.
Farther out on James Beach, you can see an old eroded headland where the beach is built out in front of it, and several ponds that have been closed off by beach progradation. You can see there's still sedimentation in front of that, a little bit of bedrock possibly in front of that headland, and many of the cottages have riprap in front of them as you approach Black Point.
Just coming out to Black's Point, we're at 400 feet and flying about 60 miles per hour. At Black's Point, you've got the bedrock again, sort of the Pictou group, sandstone, flat line anchoring this point. You've got the glacial deposits over top eroding and feeding the beaches farther in shore, or the flood tidal deposits. And as we swing around, you get a view of the importance of these anchor points and holding all these beaches together. The outer shore leading towards Sinclair Island Beach has some bedrock outcrop at the base of this cliff, which is probably about 6 to 8 meters, maybe a little less high. The beach is a very wide sand beach, beautiful beach, but the headland, as you can see here, switched back into more of a cobble and boulder lag. We'll be flying by Chance Harbour. It's open to the sea at the moment. There's a fairly large flood tidal deposit we're going over. The birds are sitting on the ebb delta, and it's a fairly wide sand beach. Not a lot of dune grass on the east side, but a better developed sand dune on the west side. The inner shores are all low wave energy environment. Another humble abode we're going by, and another structure with some pretty fancy riprap in front of it. Going by Chance Harbour, and you see the backside. There's a wharf that's anchored by this bedrock. There's a fair bit of boulder along it, though. As we approach Ferguson's Pond, again we've got wide pocket beaches, some streams exiting through them, and headlands with bedrock exposed along the lower intertidal, and the upper intertidal is also rock, and then there's a cliff which is erosional glacial deposits, probably about 10 meters or more. Going by Ferguson's Pond, there's a fair bit of establishment there. There's a bit of an outlet from it, cutting through the sand beach. And as we come across a little farther, we're coming up to the headland. Called Mackenzie's Head. And Mackenzie's Head, again, it's bedrock controlled. Sand beaches form in the embayments around the bedrock. The cliff that we see here is mostly bedrock until you get near the end, but there's more glacial deposits over top of it. As you come around the corner, though, there's quite a well-developed sand beach just in behind Mackenzie's Head. Fairly steep sloping, it looks like. Not much dune, but it's you can see the waves refracting around the corner into the beach. Going up on Powell's Head. Powell's Head again is bedrock controlled, and in behind it or landward of it is a fairly large beach, sand beach, prograded beach dune deposits. There's a road leading to it. It's hooked into Boat Harbour. It's at the mouth of our Boat Harbour. And as we come around the corner, we're picking up another sand beach in front of an erosional cliff. And then we'll go out on to Lighthouse Beach, which is the entrance to Pictou Harbour. There's a good view of the lighthouse on Pictou Beach. And you can see that it's sand beach mostly. It's got bar offshore. Since it's broken up, it's washed over at the far eastern end. Extensive large washover. They're entering Pictou Harbour, going by the lighthouse. You can see the erosion. It seems to be a fair sand deposit, just inner part.